A code. A weapon. The resonance of infinite shapes prologue. The ancient pulse the air hummed. Not with the buzz of insects or the whisper of wind, but with a sound that seemed to rise from the earth itself. A low, resonant OM that vibrated in the marrow of the priest's bones. High Priestess Yalara knelt at the center of the chamber, her hands pressed to a floor inlaid with a glowing Fibonacci spiral. Above her, the domed ceiling shimmered with constellations mapped not in stars, but in pulsing platonic solids. "The vortex opens tonight," she intoned. "The language of the gods will flow through us." Her acolytes chanted in unison, their voices harmonizing with the hum. The geometric patterns on the walls began to rotate, each line and angle bending light into prismatic waves. But as the ritual climaxed, the symbols twisted. The energy waves thickened, warping into a seething crimson. Yalara's scream echoed as the chamber imploded, leaving only dust and a single, half-melted icosahedron buried for millennia. Chapter 1. The Archaeologist's Discovery. Kazakhstan, 2042. The wind howled across the steppe like a forgotten dirge, carrying with it the bite of alkali dust and the faintest whisper of something older. Dr. Alara Voss cinched her scarf tighter over her nose, her eyes squinting against the midday glare. The Kazakh steppe was a place of contradictions, a vast, sun-scorched emptiness that somehow felt crowded, as if the ghosts of Scythian horsemen and Silk Road merchants still galloped just beyond the horizon. She knelt beside the seismic array, its spider-like sensors burrowed into the cracked earth. The machine had been spitting out erratic readings for days, but this morning's data had been different. A geometric shadow lurking 300 meters below, too symmetrical to be natural. A temple? A tomb? Alara's fingers hovered over the holographic display, tracing the angular contours. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, sharp with academic disdain. "Chasing fairy tales again, Alara? Ancient energy grids? Stick to proven science." But proven science hadn't found her father after his lab vanished into a ball of ball lightning in 32. Proven science hadn't explained why his last journal entry was a single phrase: "The geometry is alive." Dr. Voss. Alara turned. Her intern, Jax Talver, stood knee-deep in a freshly dug trench, his sunburned face lit with the manic glee of a grad student tasting discovery. At 22, he still believed in heroes, in Indiana Jones bullwhips and National Geographic glory. She envied him that. "You need to see this," he said, voice cracking. The GPR picked up a void. "And there's something glowing." Alara's pulse quickened. She slid down the trench wall, her boots kicking up plumes of ochre dust. Jax pointed to a fracture in the earth, no wider than a fist. From its depths seeped a faint cerulean light, rhythmic, like the slow blink of a sleeping eye. "We need to widen this." "Carefully," she said, snapping on gloves. Jax hesitated. "The permits don't cover invasive digging. If the Kazakh government finds out, they'll what? Revoke our funding?" She barked a laugh. The university had already threatened to pull the plug after 6 months of no measurable ROI. But Alara had learned long ago that the most profound truths were never measurable. They worked in silence, brushes scraping against sediment. Hours bled into dusk. The air grew thick with the tang of ozone. Then Jax's trowel struck stone. "Holy shit," he whispered. Alara leaned in. The artifact was a hexagonal slab, its edges sharp enough to slice skin. The surface was etched with a pattern, a tessellation of triangles within triangles, each apex aligning with uncanny precision. It reminded her of the Lorton fractal, but wrong, as if the pattern continued into dimensions her eyes couldn't parse. "Sacred geometry," she murmured, "but not symbolic. This is engineered." Jax reached out. "Don't." Too late. His fingertip grazed the stone. The reaction was instantaneous. A soundless pulse rippled outward. Alara's vision blurred, her inner ear screaming as if she'd plunged underwater. The trench walls warped, the the dust motes freezing midair. For a heartbeat, she saw through the stone, into a cavernous chamber below, its walls crawling with luminous geometric glyphs. A figure stood at its center, cloaked in gold, arms raised to a ceiling alive with swirling tetrahedrons. Then the vision snapped. Jax recoiled, clutching his hand. What the hell was that? Alara ignored him, snatching her tablet. The seismic array was haywire, gamma radiation spiking, magnetic fields oscillating in perfect Fibonacci ratios. Her throat tightened. This wasn't just an archaeological find. It was a reactor, dormant for millennia, but still thrumming with whatever the ancients had entombed here. "Pack the camp," she said, voice steady despite the adrenaline scorching her veins. "We're sealing the site. Now." Jax gaped. But the university, the press, this isn't for them. She stared at the hexagonal stone, now dull and inert. "My father disappeared chasing something like this. A universal language, he called it. Geometric patterns that could tap into energy waves, rewrite reality." She met Jax's wide eyes. "If we're right about what's buried here, it's not a relic. It's a weapon, and we're not the only ones looking." As if summoned, a shadow passed overhead, a drone, sleek and matte black, no markings. It circled once, then shot westward. Alara's stomach dropped. Corporate, military, someone with resources. "Go," she ordered. "I'll contact my fixer in Almaty. We need security, quiet security." But as Jax scrambled up the trench, Alara lingered. She pressed her palm to the stone, half hoping, half dreading another vision. Instead, she felt only a faint vibration, a subsonic hum that matched her own heartbeat. The geometry is alive. Her father's ghost had finally led her home. Chapter 2. The frequency mystic Andes Mountains. Peru. The cold was a blade here. It sliced through Kai Mendoza's woolen poncho and bit at the scars on his palms, thin, deliberate lines left by his mother's obsidian knife during his Huarachiqui right a decade ago. "To open the body to the spirit world," she'd said, her voice as steady as the glaciers above their village. But Kai had never fully believed. Not then. He knelt in the shadow of Apu Ozangate, the mountain's snow-capped peak glowing amber in the dawn light. Before him sat the quartz singing bowl, its rim etched with interlocking circles, a gift from his father, the Oxford physicist who traded his lab coat for a shaman's drum after meeting Kai's mother. "Frequency is the bridge between worlds," he'd told Kai, years before vanishing into the Amazon to chase a theory about sonic dark matter. Kai gripped the bow, its horsehair trembling in the thin air. "Focus." He dragged it along the bowl's edge. The note bloomed, a deep, resonant C-sharp that rippled through the frozen soil beneath his knees. For a moment, nothing. Then, a vibration crawled up his spine, settling behind his eyes like a second pulse. Again, the shaman, Mama Quispe, watched him from the stone altar, her face a tapestry of wrinkles and quiet judgment. She'd been his mother's mentor, a Paco who communed with mountain spirits and spat curses at mining drones. "You still fight the sound," she said, tossing a handful of coca leaves into the bowl's water. "Your father's doubt is a knot in your throat." Kai ignored her. He drew the bow again, harder. The note sharpened, and the water began to shiver. Not in random droplets, but in patterns, hexagons, their edges precise as honeycomb. His breath hitched, just like the dream. For weeks, the vision had come each night. A labyrinth of light, its walls pulsing with geometric sigils, and a voice that was neither male nor female but something older. Find the convergence. Heal the fracture. When he'd Googled the symbols, they matched nothing in the JSTOR archives or his father's old notebooks. But this morning, a YouTube video had blared from his phone over weak satellite Wi-Fi. Mysterious energy surge in Kazakh dig site. Alien tech? The shaky footage showed a glowing hexagonal stone, its surface carved with the same infinite triangles from his dreams. "The Pachamama is bleeding," Mama Kispe said abruptly. She pressed a gnarled hand to the earth. The Kyuiki, the balance, is broken. The apis cry in a language no one remembers. Kai stared at the hexagons, now oscillating faster. The note had taken on a life of its own, harmonizing with a sub-bass rumble beneath the mountain. He felt it in his molars, in the old scar on his ribs where a mining drone's shrapnel had struck him at 16. This isn't just sound, he muttered. It's a signal. Mama Kispe nodded. The earth's bones sing the Richari, the first language. But men with dead hearts twisted into weapons. She pointed to the bowl. You see the water? The Tontinsuyu priests use such patterns to speak with Inti, the sun. Now, the same shapes poison the sky. Kai followed her gaze. Beyond the bowl, a scar of deforestation cut across the valley. Crow Energy's lithium mines, their drones buzzing like metallic flies. His fists clenched. 2 years ago, those mines had triggered a landslide that buried his mother's village. No bodies recovered. No apologies. He lifted the bow again, but Mama Kispe seized his wrist. Enough. You heard the call. Now act. Act how? He snapped. I'm not a priest. I'm not even a good son. The old woman's eyes softened. She pressed a pendant into his palm, a bronze disc engraved with a spiral that seemed to coil inward forever. Your mother gave you her scars. Your father gave you his questions. Now go. Find the woman in the desert. She holds the other half of the song. The pendant burned against his skin. On its surface, the spiral began to rotate. Kai stumbled back as a vision engulfed him. A chamber deep underground, walls thrumming with geometric light. A woman in a dust-stained field jacket, Alara, pressing her palm to a stone hexagon. Their vibrations sinking. A voice, thunderous and tender. The cipher is fractured. Reunite the harmonics. The vision shattered. Kai gasped, his lungs starved. Mama Kispe studied him, unflinching. The corporations are already hunting her. You have days. Hours, maybe. A roar split the sky. Kai looked up. A Crow Energy drone circled overhead, its camera lens glinting. Targeting lasers danced over the singing bowl. Go! Mama Kispe shoved him toward the mountain pass. The jungle will hide you. Follow the Uni Kyuiki, the sacred lines. Kai ran, the pendant's spiral blazing hotter with every step. Behind him, the drone fired. The singing bowl exploded in a shower of quartz and ice. He didn't look back. Chapter 3. Corporate Shadows. Silicon Valley, California. The boardroom smelled of lithium batteries and ambition. Darius Crow leaned back in his chair, his augmented reality lenses painting the air with schematics of the Kazakh dig site. Thermal scans glowed like neon arteries, converging on a subterranean chamber pulsing with energy signatures no human reactor could replicate. 47 terajoules, the readout blinked. Enough to power San Francisco for a decade, or level it in seconds. The Kazakh government's clueless, said Zaravas. No relation to Alara, she'd clarified thrice, his head of R&D. She flicked a hologram of Alara's face into the center of the table. The archaeologist glared from the screen, her goggles smeared with dust, a hexagonal stone clutched in her hand. Dr. Voss published a paper last year on non-terrestrial energy artifacts in Mesopotamia. She'll try to preserve the site. Publicize it. That's a problem. Crow smirked. Offer her a grant. A big one. Crow Energy's Initiative for Ancient Technologies. Zara's eyebrow twitched, the closest she ever came to disapproval. And if she refuses? Then remind her that unregulated excavations cause accidents. He zoomed in on the stone, its geometric carvings igniting a familiar itch in his skull. How long until we replicate the energy output? Years. Maybe decades. Whatever's down there isn't just a power source. It's computational. The gamma waves are structured like binary, but fractal, infinitely scalable. Crow's grin widened. Asterisk a code. A weapon. A godhood. Asterisk he'd built his empire on such leaps, privatizing fusion reactors, hacking quantum grids, buying senators like cheap suits. But this was the vault of heaven itself, cracked open by a dirt-digging academic. Burn the blueprints for Project Tesla, he ordered. Redirect all teams to Kazakhstan. And send a gift to Dr. Voss. Zara paused. The usual? No. Send the relic. Crow Estate, Hillsborough midnight. The vault door hissed open. Crow stepped inside, the air thick with the reek of ionized metal. His great-grandfather's trophies lined the walls. Shrunken heads from Papua, a mummified falcon from Giza, the skull of a Homo naledi child. All plundered, all powerless. Except one. The artifact sat on a pedestal, lit by a shaft of moonlight. A half-melted icosahedron, its 20 triangular faces warped as if scorched by a star. The Crow family had called it the Godsid. In 1921, his great-grandfather, a fossil broker for the British Museum, had looted it from a Sumerian ziggurat. The entire dig team died within a year. Suicides, fever, a gas leak. The Godsid's curse, the family whispered. Crow ran a finger over its surface. Cold. Always cold. Show me again, he whispered. A pinch of his neural implant activated the relic. The air rippled. Asterisk visions, fractured and hellish. A city of silver spires collapsing into geometric ash. Priests chanting as their bodies dissolved into light. The high priestess Yalara, he knew her name, though he'd never been told, screaming as the vortex consumed her. And then, a voice? Asterisk, you tread the razor's edge, Crow. The cipher is not yours to break. He laughed. Everything's mine to break. The vision shifted. Blueprints for machines he couldn't comprehend, energy waves bending to sacred ratios. Power, raw, infinite, coursing through him like a drug. A chime broke the trance. His lens display flashed red, a security alert. The Kazakh site's gamma emissions had just spiked 300%. Alaravos was getting closer. He sealed the vault and strode to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below, the Crow Energy campus glittered, drones flitting between labs like cybernetic fireflies. His grandfather had built this empire on coal, his father on oil. But I'll transcend them all. The Godsid's frost still lingered on his fingertips. Sir? Zara's voice crackled through his implant. The relic's en route. But there's anomalous activity at Site Gamma. He watched a cargo drone rise, its belly loaded with the Godsid's lead-lined crate. Explain. The test reactor's energy waves are interacting with the artifact. The readings, it's like they're communicating, as if the relic is a key. Crow's pulse quickened. Proceed. At full capacity. The risk of containment failure is why I pay you. Proceed. He severed the connection. On the horizon, storm clouds writhed, their shapes uncannily geometric. Hexagons within hexagons, a living Mandelbrot set. The Godsid's voice echoed in his bones. You will burn empires to ash. Yes, he murmured, starting with hers. Kazakhstan steppe, Alara's camp. The delivery arrived at dawn. Alara stared at the crate, her breath fogging in the cold. The Crow Energy logo, a stylized icosahedron, glowed faintly on the lid. Don't open it, Jax warned. It's a Trojan horse. Or a bomb. She pried the lid off anyway. Inside, nestled in black foam, was a palm-sized icosahedron. Melted, ancient, identical to the one from her father's last journal entry. A note card lay beneath it. Asterisk, some questions are better unasked. DK. Asterisk, as her fingers brushed the relic, the world dissolved. Asterisk, she stood in the Sumerian ziggurat, 1921. Crow's ancestor, pale and sweating, pocketing the Godsid as his team choked on black smoke. Then her father, decades later, screaming as fractal flames consumed his lab. And finally, Darius Crow, his eyes twin black holes, standing atop a mountain of ash as energy waves devoured the sky. Alara wrenched her hand back, while rising in her throat. "Pack everything," she hissed. "We're moving the site. Now." But the relic is a warning. And a threat? She grabbed a shovel, her mind racing. Crow knew. He'd always known. And he'd burn the world to claim what lay beneath her feet. Above them, unseen, a crow drone blinked its crimson eye. Chapter 4. Decoding the language safe house near Almaty, Kazakhstan. The room stank of burnt coffee and paranoia. Alara paced the cramped attic, her boots scuffing over floorboards warped by decades of neglect. On the rickety table lay the two relics, her hexagonal stone from the steppe, still flecked with Kazakh soil, and Crow's melted icosahedron, its warped faces glinting like a predator's teeth. She'd kept them separated since the Godsid's delivery, each sealed in Faraday cage lockboxes. But tonight, their vibrations hummed through the metal, harmonizing in a way that made her molars ache. The cipher is fractured. Reunite the harmonics. Kai's voice, or was it the Godsid's, echoed in her skull. She hadn't slept since his encrypted email arrived 3 days prior. "I know what Crow sent you. I can help, but not digitally." Now, he was late. A knock. Not on the door, but the window. Alara whirled, wrenching the pistol from her waistband. A figure crouched on the fire escape, backlit by the neon glare of Almaty's skyline. His hood fell, revealing a face younger than she'd expected. Mid-30s, Quechua cheekbones, eyes bruised with exhaustion. He pressed a pendant to the glass, a bronze spiral, identical to the one from her vision. She opened the window. "You're insane. Crow's drones are everywhere." Kai slid inside, snow melting off his parka. "Not here. Your fixer's jamming them." For now, his gaze locked on the relics. "You've felt it, haven't you? The pull when they're close. Like magnets. Or lovers." Alara kept the gun raised. "Prove you're not Crow's puppet." He laughed, hollow. "Crow's drones killed my mother. Leveled her village for lithium. I'd die before helping him." Reaching into his pack, he withdrew a shattered quartz singing bowl. "Mama Kispe used this to show me the convergence. Your stone and that thing are two halves of a key. But Crow's piece is corrupted." Alara hesitated, then lowered the gun. "Corrupted how?" Kai touched the Godsid's crate. A static charge arced to his fingers. Its frequency's inverted. Instead of harmonizing energy, it amplifies entropy. That's why the ancient chamber imploded. That's why your father, don't. Her voice cracked. "Just show me." 3:47 a.m. They worked in silence, their breath fogging in the unheated room. Kai arranged the relics at opposite ends of a chalk-drawn Fibonacci spiral, its curves precise as a nautilus shell. Alara wired sensors to both stones, her tablet streaming data. The hexagonal one emits 528 Hz, the miracle tone DNA repair frequency, she muttered. But the icosahedron, 432 Hz, the heartbeat of the Earth. But phase shifted. Kai tuned a portable theremin, its eerie wail syncing with the relic's hum. "They're conversing. Arguing, really?" Alara glanced at him. For a man who'd crossed continents fleeing drones, he moved with unsettling calm. Like his father, she realized. Dr. Rafael Mendoza's papers on quantum acoustics had been required reading in her doctoral program. You inherited his work. The sonic dark matter theory. Kai's jaw tightened. He inherited mine. I was 8 when he left. Took his research, his gear, everything. Mom said the forest swallowed him. He adjusted the theremin's pitch. Turns out he was right. There is a language beneath reality. He just couldn't. The relics flared. A hologram burst from the hexagonal stone. Rotating dodecahedron, its edges shimmering with glyphs. Alara's tablet screeched. Energy waves spiking, forming interference patterns that mirrored the chalk spiral. "It's a Rosetta Stone," she breathed. "The glyphs aren't text. They're equations." "Look," Kai traced the hologram. "Energy ratios. Phi proportions. This is a manual. For stabilizing the vortex." The Godsid pulsed angrily, warping the hologram. Crimson tendrils snaked through the equations, corrupting them into jagged fractals. It's fighting the translation, Kai said. We need to isolate. The window exploded. Alara hit the floor as glass shards rained down. A drone spotlight flooded the room, its whine drowning Kai's shout. Voss, hands where I can see them. A man's voice, Russian accent. Crow's mercenaries. Kai lunged for the relics. Grab them and run. Too late. A neural stun grenade rolled into the room. Alara's last thought before the pulse hit was of her father's journal. The geometry is alive. And it was angry. Consciousness returned in fragments. Cold concrete. The reek of diesel. Alara's wrists zip-tied to a steel chair. Across the dim warehouse, Kai slumped against a support beam, blood trickling from his temple. The relics sat on a folding table between them, flanked by Crow's mercenaries. Dr. Voss, Mr. Mendoza. Darius Crow stepped into the light, his tailored suit untouched by the grime. He lifted the Godsid, its twisted faces reflecting in his AR lenses. You've made progress. Faster than my teams, even. But then, you had motivation. Alara strained against the ties. You'll destroy us all. That thing isn't a tool. It's a cancer. Crow smiled. Cancer is just unchecked growth. And growth, he nodded to a mercenary who slammed Kai's head against the beam, requires sacrifice. Kai spat blood. You're a cliché. A Bond villain with better PR. Ah, but Bond villains lose. Crow pressed the Godsid to the hexagonal stone. A dissonant chord shook the warehouse, peeling paint from the walls. You've seen the holograms. The equations. Now show me how to activate them. Alara's mind raced. The relic's energy was volatile, yes, but Crow's arrogance was volatile too. Use it. Fine, she lied. But we need the theremin. And space. Unless you want this place flattened. Crow hesitated, then waved the mercenaries back. Kai met her eyes. Trust me, she willed. As Crow placed the relics in the center of the floor, Alara whispered, When I say now, hit the ground. What are you, now? She stomped her heel on the concrete. The vibration echoed through the Faraday-caged lockboxes under her chair. Improvised EMPs, courtesy of her fixer. The warehouse plunged into darkness. The relics erupted. A shockwave of light and sound tore through the room, geometric patterns burning into Alara's retinas. The mercenaries screamed as their neural implants fried. Crow staggered, clutching the Godsid, its edges glowing white-hot. Run! Kai yelled, wrenching free of his ties. They fled into the frozen night, the relics combined frequencies screaming like a dying star. Behind them, the warehouse collapsed, Crow's roar swallowed by the avalanche of steel. Dawn they sheltered in a Soviet-era bunker, its walls plastered with Alara's maps and equations. The relics lay between them, silent but thrumming with residual energy. Kai bandaged his forearm, hands shaking. That EMP trick, your father's work? Alara nodded. He used it to contain ball lightning. Before, she touched the hexagonal stone. Its warmth felt almost alive. We can't let Crow near the temple. If he merges the relics at the source, the vortex, Kai finished. Yalara's mistake. A black hole in human form. He leaned closer. But what if we use the temple? Not to open the vortex, but to heal it. The equations, they're about balance. Harmonizing energy, not exploiting it. Alara studied him. The bleeding mystic with a physicist's mind. The orphan who still believed in healing. You're proposing we reboot a 12,000-year-old reactor, she said. Yep. With no manual. We are the manual. He tapped the relics. These are just interfaces. The real code is here. He touched her temple, then his chest. In the harmonics of us. Alara snorted. That's the worst ancient wisdom line I've ever heard. But she was already sketching a plan. Chapter 5. The Nexus Network Saryarka Steppe, Kazakhstan, 48 hours. Later, the temple's entrance was a wound in the earth. Alara stood at the edge of the excavation pit, her breath visible in the pre-dawn chill. Below, the hexagonal stone glowed faintly, its light bleeding through the cracks of a sealed chamber door. The same geometric patterns from her visions crawled across its surface, fractals that seemed to breathe. It's a keystone, Kai said, crouching beside her. He'd spent the night cross-referencing the holographic equations with his mother's star charts. Not just for this temple. There are others. Everywhere. He unfolded a map, its surface dotted with red circles. Göbekli Tepe, Mount Nimrut, the Bermuda Triangle, Easter Island. The equations aren't instructions. They're coordinates. This temple is node alpha. The others are amplifiers, like a planetary antenna array. Alara traced the lines connecting the sites. A dodecahedron spanning the globe. A network. But for what? Kai placed his pendant on the map. The bronze spiral spun, aligning with the geometric ley lines. To broadcast the universal language. To call for help, or to warn someone. A gust of wind howled across the steppe, carrying the metallic tang of an approaching storm. Alara's fixer, a grizzled ex-MI6 operative named Gregor, trudged up the slope. Drones spotted 20 clicks east. Crows. We've got maybe an hour. Kai stood. Then we opened the chamber. Now. Alara hesitated. The relics hung heavy in her pack, their combined frequencies making her teeth ache. If we're wrong about harmonizing them, we're not? Kai gripped her shoulder. The equation showed a feedback loop. Activate node alpha with the right frequency, and it stabilizes the others. But Crow's meddling, he didn't need to finish. The tremors had started yesterday, subtle quakes in geologically inert zones. Chile, Indonesia, Georgia, each near a nexus site. Do it, Alara said. Inside the chamber, the air tasted of static and age. Alara's headlamp swept over walls carved with celestial maps, constellations unrecognizable, planets labeled in geometric glyphs. At the chamber's heart stood a dais, its surface etched with a spiral of infinitesimal triangles. A perfect match for the relics. Place them here, Kai whispered. Together, they set the hexagonal stone and the godset on the dais. The chamber shuddered. Light erupted, not as a hologram, but as a pulse that tore through their minds. Visions of a galaxy threaded by luminous threads, each nexus site a glowing node. Beings of shimmering geometry tending the network, their forms shifting between fractal and flesh. Then, a rupture. Crimson energy devouring the threads. A scream across millennia. The vision snapped. The fracture, Kai gasped. What the priestess saw. It's happening again. Alara's tablet buzzed. Live seismology data scrolled. A magnitude 7.3 quake in Turkey, epicenter at Mount Nimrut. Crow's there. He's overloading the nodes. Gregor's voice crackled over their comms. Drones inbound. And the grounds, Christ, it's moving. The chamber shook. Dust rained from the ceiling as the relics' glow intensified, their frequencies clashing. We need to sync them. Alara shouted over the din. Your pendant, the spiral. It's a tuning key. Kai yanked the chain from his neck, pressing the bronze disc to the dais. The spiral aligned with the carved triangles. Play the frequencies. The ones from the warehouse. Alara pulled up the theremin's recording, 528 Hz and 432 Hz, phase-corrected. The chamber's walls flared gold, geometric patterns spinning faster, faster. Harmony. The quaking ceased. The relics fused, their light softening to a steady azure. Above the dais, a hologram flickered, Earth crisscrossed by a lattice of light. Nodes glowed green, except for Mount Nimrut, blazing red. The network's destabilizing, Alara said. If Nimrut falls, the fracture widens, Kai finished. We have to get there. A roar echoed through the tunnel. Gregor's final transmission cut mid-curse. Crow's voice boomed from above, amplified by drone speakers. You can't heal a wound by band-aiding it, Dr. Voss. Let me show you how it's done. Mount Nimrut, Turkey. 6 hours later, the summit was a war zone. Crow's mercenaries had blown the heads off the ancient stone statues, replacing them with plasma drills boring into the mountain's heart. The air reeked of sulfur and burnt ozone. Below, the town of a diamond lay in ruins, its streets split by tremors. Alara and Kai watched from a ridge, binoculars revealing the source of the quakes. A melted icosahedron, identical to Crow's relic, pulsing atop a mechanized altar. Energy waves rippled from it, distorting the sky into a kaleidoscope of fractured geometry. He's not just destroying the node, Kai said. He's using it as a lens. To amplify the Godsid's corruption, Alara adjusted her gas mask. Take out the relic, we neutralize the lens. But it'll trigger a backlash. Yeah. Kai checked his pendant. The spiral spun wildly. We'll have seconds to harmonize the frequencies. And no margin for error. They descended into chaos. The altar crow stood bathed in crimson light, his suit immaculate, eyes wild. You're too late, he called as Alara and Kai dodged gunfire. The fracture's inevitable. But from its ashes, Kai hurled a resonance grenade, a makeshift device combining Alara's EMP tech with his frequency charts. The blast shredded the altar's electronics. Now, Alara screamed. They lunged for the relic. Kai's pendant met its surface. Alara played the harmonized tones. For a heartbeat, light enveloped them, gold and blue weaving a lattice of healing energy. Then the world split. A fault line ripped through the mountain, swallowing Crow's mercenaries. The relic shattered. The corrupted energy wave recoiled, arcing skyward like a reverse lightning strike. Alara grabbed Kai as the ground fell away. They slid into a crevice, the air screaming with dissonant frequencies. Above, the sky itself seemed to crack, a jagged black line splitting the clouds. Did we stop it? Kai coughed, blood on his lips. Alara stared at the holographic lattice flickering in her lens display. Mount Nimrut's node was dark, but the fracture had only paused. No, she said. We bought time. The network's failing. We need to activate all nodes. Together. Kai slumped. There are dozens. We're not alone. She pointed to the horizon. Civilians from a diamond climbed the ruins, drawn by the light. Among them, a girl no older than 10 traced a glowing hexagon in the air with her fingers, a perfect replica of the temple symbols. The Universal Language, Awakening. Chapter 6. The Scholar's Betrayal. Atlas Mountains, Morocco, Node Theta. The command tent hummed with desperation. Dr. Liam Wren stared at the holographic globe hovering over the table, its surface spiderwebbed with crimson fractures. 5 nodes had fallen in as many days. Taiwan, Bolivia, Namibia. Each collapse triggering tsunamis, quakes, and auroras that scorched the sky. The team's makeshift network of activists, scientists, and mystics was fraying. And Alara's relentless optimism was starting to sound like a delusion. We need to prioritize the European nodes, Alara said, her voice raw from days without sleep. She zoomed in on Stonehenge, its ancient stones glowing faintly on the hologram. If we stabilize the UK grid, it could buffer the Mediterranean. Kai leaned against the tent's support beam, his pendant spinning like a dowsing rod. The nodes aren't machines, Alara. They're alive. We can't buffer them like a fucking power grid. Wren cleared his throat. Actually, the equations suggest harmonic resonance could. The equations suggest? Kai snapped. People are dying. Your formulas aren't stopping that. Alara rubbed her temples. Enough. Wren, what's the status on the Moroccan node? Wren adjusted his glasses, avoiding her gaze. Local teams are in position. The glyphs here match Göbekli Tepe's, but there's interference. Crow's jamming the frequencies. Liar. The word burned in his gut. The interference wasn't Crow's, it was his. 3 days ago, he'd rerouted the Moroccan node's stabilization codes to a dummy server. All part of the deal. Help me fracture the network, Crow had said, the Godsid's hologram flickering in Wren's Geneva apartment, and I'll spare your daughter. The fracture comes for everyone, Liam, but it doesn't have to come for her. Claire's face filled his mind, 8 years old, laughing in a Zurich park, unaware her rare mitochondrial disease had a 98% mortality rate. Crow's labs had a cure. All it cost was the world. 2:13 a.m., Node Theta activation. The Atlas Mountains loomed like sleeping giants, their peaks etched with geometric runes only visible under starlight. Alara and Kai stood at the node's epicenter, a stone circle older than language. Villagers surrounded them, chanting in Tamazight, their voices weaving with the theremin's eerie whine. Wren monitored the feed from the command tent, his palms slick. Crow's orders echoed in his skull. Sabotage the harmonics. Let the node implode. He typed a command. The villagers' chants stuttered. The stone circle flared crimson. Ren. Alara's voice crackled over comms. The frequency's inverting. Reset the ground split. A fissure ripped through the circle, swallowing 2 villagers whole. The theremin shrieked, its sound waves warping into a physical force that hurled Kai against a monolith. Alara lunged for the control tablet, but the screen blazed with error messages, corrupted sequence. Core breach imminent. Ren watched the chaos on his feed, nausea rising. Claire's face flickered on his laptop, a photo from her last birthday. I'm sorry. He sent the kill code. The node exploded. 3 a.m., command tent, they found him clutching Claire's stuffed rabbit, a relic of a life before equations and extinction. Alara's punch knocked him to the floor. You killed them. 12 people. Children. Because Crow what? Promised you a villa? A fucking promotion? Kai held her back, but his eyes were murderous. Why? Ren spat blood. He has my daughter. Claire's sick. His labs can save her. He laughed, broken. You think we're heroes? We're insects. The fracture's inevitable. At least I'm saving one life. Alara froze. For a heartbeat, Ren saw pity in her eyes. Then it hardened. The fracture's only inevitable if we let Crow win. And Claire? She tossed him a holodisk. Security footage of a lab. Empty but for a small bed. Crow never had her. She died last week. In a hospital. Alone. Ren's scream echoed through the tent. Not of grief, but of understanding. He'd sold his soul for a lie. Kai knelt, gripping Ren's collar. Fix this. Tell us how Crow's targeting the nodes. He's not. You are. Ren nodded to the hologram. Every time you harmonize a node, it creates a resonance signature. Crow's tracking it. He's hunting you. All of you. Alara's tablet buzzed. Alerts flooded in. Nodes failing in rapid succession. Crow's face flashed on a news feed, standing atop a melting glacier in Greenland. The age of human arrogance ends tonight. Embrace the fracture. The tent's flaps rustled. A villager stepped inside, her eyes milky with cataracts. She spoke in Tamazite, Kai translating, the old ones, they want to speak to you. Behind her, the air rippled. A hologram flickered, not Crow's, but Yalara's, her form woven from starlight and sorrow. You stand at the brink, she intoned, her voice 1,000 whispers. The cipher requires sacrifice, not of lives, but of lies. See yourselves as you are. The hologram split, revealing each of them. Alara, clutching her father's journal, its pages blank. Kai, kneeling at his mother's unmarked grave. Ren, holding Claire's rabbit, its fur rotted to dust. We're fighting ghosts, Kai muttered. No, Yalara said. You are ghosts. Until you choose to be more. The hologram vanished. Ren stood, trembling. There's a backdoor in Crow's code. I can reverse the sabotage, but I need access to the Godsid. Alara eyed him. Why? To amplify the harmonics. And to die. The backlash will. It'll kill me. He smiled faintly. Claire would have liked that. A proper Greek tragedy. 5:30 a.m. Node Theta ruins. Ren stood at the fissure's edge, the Godsid's corrupted icosahedron in hand. Villagers chanted behind him, their voices weaving with Alara's theremin. Tell Claire, he hesitated. You'll tell her yourself, Alara said, though her eyes said otherwise. Ren activated the Godsid. The world dissolved into light. Epilogue, dawn. The node stabilized, its lattice stretching golden across the hologram. Ren's body was never found. In the command tent, Kai scrolled through Crow's breached files. He's heading to the South Pole. The final node. Alara folded Ren's holodisk into Claire's rabbit. Then we end this there. Above them, the fracture pulsed, a reminder that some cracks never heal, only widen. Chapter 7. The Wave Amplification. Geneva, Switzerland, 72 hours after Ren's sacrifice. The sky was a corpse. Ash fell like snow over Lake Geneva, blotting out the sun. The city's once pristine boulevards writhed with refugees fleeing the fracture's advance. A jagged black seam that now split the horizon, its edges crackling with viridian lightning. From within the void came whispers, not of wind, but of voices, their words geometric, their grief infinite. Alara Voss stood on the roof of CERN's abandoned particle collider facility, her binoculars trained on the fracture. Beside her, Kai Mendoza tuned a salvaged theremin to frequencies only he could hear. "It's growing faster," Alara said. The fracture had swallowed Nairobi overnight. Satellite feeds showed cities folding into fractal patterns, their skyscrapers bent like melted wax. Crow's not just destabilizing nodes anymore. He's feeding the vortex. Kai's fingers trembled over the theremin's antenna. The universal language, it's inverted. He's using it to unwrite reality. A hologram flickered between them, Yalara's spectral form, fraying at the edges. The fracture is a wound in time. Crow's hubris has become its infection. Alara's grip tightened on her father's journal, its pages now filled with equations only visible under starlight. "How do we stop a wound from bleeding?" "Stitch it with light," Yalara said. "But the needle must pass through darkness." The hologram dissolved. Kai cursed. "Cryptic ghost bullshit. Real helpful." A roar split the air. Overhead, a Crow energy gunship descended, its hull marked with the twisted icosahedron logo. Plasma cannons charged. "Move." Alara yanked Kai into the stairwell as the roof exploded. CERN sublevel B7. The Godsid's cradle. They fled deeper into the facility, past labs littered with half-melted quantum computers and the husks of scientists fused to their desks, victims of Crow's first experiments. "He's here for the Hadron Collider," Alara realized. "He's going to weaponize it." Kai froze. To do what? Create a synthetic node. Amplify the fracture into a global black hole. They reached sublevel B7. The collider's main chamber loomed, its titanium doors pried open. Inside, Crow stood before a pulsating orb of corrupted energy, the Godsid, swollen to the size of a minivan. Its surface seethed with inverted geometry, triangles devouring themselves in endless recursion. The cleanup crew." Crow didn't turn. "Admire my work." The fracture's final form. Alara's tablet blared, a live feed from the International Space Station. The fracture now spanned continents, its edges peeling back reality to reveal a void where stars writhed like maggots. "You're not a god," Kai spat. "You're a fucking janitor, mopping up existence." Crow smiled. "Janitors serve a purpose. They remove filth." He pressed a hand to the Godsid. "Like your quaint attempts to heal the nodes. Did you think I didn't let you stabilize them? Each success tuned the network to my frequency." Alara's blood went cold. The holographic lattice, its golden threads now pulsed crimson. "The universal language was never yours," Crow said. "It's the universe's suicide note, and I'm its scribe." The Godsid erupted. The vortex unleashed, the collider chamber imploded. Kai grabbed Alara as the floor dissolved, reality unraveling around them. They fell through a kaleidoscope of dying worlds, cities folded into Mobius strips, oceans boiling into fractal steam, a child's laugh echoing across eons. They landed in a desert of black sand. Above, the fracture yawned like a serpent's maw. "Where?" Kai choked. "The in-between," Alara whispered. "Where the fracture chews reality." Shapes moved in the dunes, figures of light and shadow, their bodies geometric, their eyes supernovae. "The old ones. You tread the razored edge," they intoned. "To mend, you must break." Kai stumbled forward. "We need an army. A way to fight Crow. Armies are Crow's language. Speak yours." Alara touched the sand. It shifted into symbols, the universal language, raw and untainted. "The nodes. We reactivate them here, in the fracture's heart." Kai stared. "That'll vaporize us." "Yes." He took her hand. "Took you long enough to ask." The harmonic gambit. They stood back to back, Alara reciting equations from her father's journal, Kai chanting in Quechua. The sand swirled, forming a mandala of light. Nodes ignited across the holographic lattice. Gobekli Tepe, Easter Island, the Amazon. Their energies funneling into the desert. The fracture recoiled, its edges fraying. Crow's scream echoed through the void. "You can't rewrite entropy?" "No," Alara said, "but we can drown it." The mandala exploded. Epilogue. The threshold they awoke on the CERN roof, the fracture frozen mid-collapse. The godsid lay cracked at their feet. Crow was gone. Did we? Kai rasped. Alara checked her tablet. The nodes glowed gold, the lattice holding. For now, we bought time. But the fracture's still hungry. A child's laugh echoed. Below, a girl drew symbols in the ash, the universal language, pure and bright. Kai smiled. Maybe it's not our fight alone anymore. Above, the stars blinked in perfect geometric harmony. Chapter 8. The Sacred Synthesis Global Nexus Sites, synchronized rituals the world held its breath. From the Andes to the Australian outback, crowds gathered at the Nexus sites, farmers and physicists, shamans and schoolchildren, their hands clasped around relics, smartphones, and singing bowls. Social media streams blazed with live feeds. Hashtags like hashtag harmonic resistance and hashtag we are the lattice trending alongside more memes. The fracture loomed overhead, a jagged black pupil in the sky, its edges gnawing at the moon. Alara stood at the Giza Plateau, the Great Pyramid humming beneath her boots. Kai knelt beside her, wiring a jury-rigged resonator to the pyramid's apex. Below, thousands chanted in Arabic, Hebrew, and Coptic, their voices syncing with the drone of didgeridoos from a feed in Uluru. It's working, Kai said, his tablet streaming data from global nodes. The harmonics are aligning, but we need the final trigger. Alara eyed the fracture. Inside it, Crow's silhouette writhed, a titan of corrupted geometry, his body a lattice of inverted fractals. He'd become the fracture's avatar, his voice a seismic rumble. You cling to a lie. Entropy is the only truth. She tightened her headset. All sights, activate on my mark. 3, 2, a gunshot rang out. Cairo streets, 10 minutes earlier drive Amar Patel sprinted through the chaos, her lab coat flapping. The vial in her pocket burned hotter with every step, a synthetic frequency serum brewed from Alara's equations and Kai's pendant. Around her, the city crumbled. Cars levitated in anti-gravity bubbles, their metal warping into Fibonacci spirals. A child's scream pierced the din as the fracture's tendrils snatched a toddler from his mother's arms. Amara dove into a collapsing alley. Her phone buzzed, a FaceTime call from her wife in Mumbai, trapped under rubble. Amara, the serum, I know. I'm close. She skidded into the plaza. The resonator glowed atop the pyramid, Alara and Kai mere specks against the bleeding sky. A mercenary stepped into her path, Crow's logo glowing on his armor. Hand it over, Doc. Amara hesitated. Then, with a surgeon's precision, she jammed the vial into her neck. The serum hit her bloodstream. The frequency surge Alara's countdown faltered as Amara's body erupted in light. The scientist turned conduit rose above Cairo, her skin glowing with geometric tattoos. The serum fused her DNA to the universal language, her scream harmonizing every node on Earth. Now, she broadcast, her voice 1,000 frequencies. The world ignited. In Stonehenge, druids and astrophysicists joined hands, their chants syncing with Tesla coils. In Kyoto, monks and schoolgirls folded origami cranes into a fractal swarm. In the Amazon, elders and loggers, armed with chainsaws turned resonance tools, carved sacred symbols into burning trees. Kai gripped Alara's hand. You feel that? It's singing. The pyramids hummed in C major. The Himalayas thrummed a B-flat minor. The combined frequencies wove a lattice of light, its threads stitching the fracture closed. Crow roared, his fractal limbs dissolving. You can't unbreak what's meant to break. We're not unbreaking it, Alara said. We're making something new. The sacrifice Amara's body began to crystallize, her serum-fueled cells rewriting into quartz. It's too much, Kai yelled. She'll shatter. Alara's mind raced. The equations, balance requires equivalence. The network needs a conductor, someone to channel the surge. Kai met her gaze. Together, they leapt from the pyramid, grasping Amara's hands midair. The energy tore through them. Alara's bones became equations. Kai's blood became sine waves. Amara's crystallized form diffracted them into a spectrum of light, gold, azure, violet. that lanced into the fracture. Crow's final scream shook continents. This changes nothing. Then silence. Epilogue. Dawn they awoke in the Sahara. The dunes around them fused to glass. The fracture was gone. So was Amara. Alara's tablet flickered. Global feeds showed the Nexus sites intact, their energy waves stabilized. The universal language scrolled across every screen, untranslated yet understood. Kai touched her arm. Look. A child knelt in the sand, drawing the same symbols from Alara's visions. But this time, the glyphs glowed. It's in them now, Alara whispered. The language, the harmony. Kai smiled. Told you we weren't the manual. Above, the stars winked in perfect geometric unison, a lattice stretching into infinity. Chapter 9. The Universal Tongue, Antarctica. Node Omega, the fracture's remnants clung to the South Pole like a scar, its edges shimmering with unstable geometry. Crow stood at its epicenter, his body a grotesque lattice of fractured light and molten metal. The Godsid's corruption had consumed him, fusing his flesh to the relic's inverted frequencies. He was no longer a man, but a paradox, a black hole of greed wearing human skin. Alara and Kai approached across the ice, their breaths crystallizing in the -60 degrees Celsius air. Behind them, a holographic army flickered. Every soul who'd ever harmonized a node, their collective consciousness projected through the lattice. A Maori elder, a Tibetan monk, a Ukrainian engineer, a Nigerian schoolgirl, their voices wove into a single phrase, "You are out of tune." Crow laughed, the sound splitting glaciers. You think your choir frightens me? I am entropy. I am the end. No, Alara said, stepping forward. You're a footnote. She raised her father's journal. The pages disintegrated, their equations merging with the lattice. Kai's pendant glowed, its spiral unwinding into a helix of pure sound. Together, they spoke the first true word of the universal language, a syllable that existed before language, a vibration that birthed light. Enough. The fracture convulsed. Crow's form unraveled, his screams harmonizing into a chord that shook the planet. I am inevitable. You were alone, the lattice replied. Crow's atoms dispersed, his consciousness dissolving into the static between stars. The Godsid cracked, its inverted frequencies flooding the lattice, and were transformed. The relic's corruption became a vaccine, its malice distilled into wisdom. The fracture healed. 1 year later, Giza Plateau, the Nile glittered under a sky threaded with luminous geometric formations, the lattice, now visible to all. Children skipped through holographic mandalas, their laughter harmonizing with the pyramid's hum. A teenaged girl, the same one who'd drawn symbols in the sand, lectured to a crowd of scientists and shamans. The universal tongue isn't spoken, it's felt. Like this. She pressed her palm to an obelisk. It sang a note that bloomed into a flower of light. Alara watched from the dunes, her hair streaked with silver. She's better at this than we ever were. Kai grinned, tuning a new singing bowl forged from the Godsid's shards. Kids these days, no respect for near-death experiences. They'd aged a lifetime in a year. Alara's father's journal was now a cornerstone of the new enlightenment, its pages displayed in every school. Kai's pendant hung in the UN hall, a symbol of science and spirit entwined. You're still leaving? Kai asked quietly. Alara nodded. The Mars colony had detected a nexus node in Valles Marineris. They need someone who speaks the language. You'll teach them. The kid'll teach Earth. He hesitated. And us? She kissed him, a conversation in frequencies. No words needed. Epilogue. Celestial choir, the starship harmonic breached the exosphere, its hull etched with sacred geometry. Inside, Alara floated in 0G, her tablet streaming Earth's lattice, now interwoven with new threads from Mars, Europa, and 100 exoplanets. A chime echoed through the ship. On screen, a fractal being shimmered, its form a spiral of galaxies. Welcome to the chorus. Alara smiled. Took you long enough. Far below, Kai played his singing bowl atop the Great Pyramid. The notes soared into the cosmos, a greeting and a goodbye, and the universe sang back. The resonance of infinite shapes prologue. The ancient pulse the air hummed, not with the buzz of insects or the whisper of wind, but with a sound that seemed to rise from the earth itself, a low, resonant oem that vibrated in the marrow of the priest's bones. High Priestess Yalara knelt at the center of the chamber, her hands pressed to a floor inlaid with a glowing Fibonacci spiral. Above her, the domed ceiling shimmered with constellations mapped not in stars, but in pulsing platonic solids. "The vortex opens tonight," she intoned. "The language of the gods will flow through us." Her acolytes chanted in unison, their voices harmonizing with the hum. The geometric patterns on the walls began to rotate, each line and angle bending light into prismatic waves. But as the ritual climaxed, the symbols twisted. The energy waves thickened, warping into a seething crimson. Yalara's scream echoed as the chamber imploded, leaving only dust and a single, half-melted icosahedron buried for millennia. Chapter 1. The Archaeologist's Discovery, Kazakhstan. 2042. The wind howled across the steppe like a forgotten dirge, carrying with it the bite of alkali dust and the faintest whisper of something older. Dr. Alara Voss,